Normal Bitcoin users don't have that level of awareness. The only people who do it worse actually are Ethereum.
Edward Snowden is the most qualified person in the world to discuss security. As a result, when Snowden discredits the security of Bitcoin and Ethereum, you should be deeply concerned if you own these coins. However, make sure you stay until the end, because Will Snowden revealed the only coin that he trusts enough to use and even discusses the crypto that he developed. You don't want to miss that.
I've, said this number of times, written about this. You said Bitcoin is failing comprehensively on the privacy angle. Since, of course, the transactions are not fully anonymous, they're semi-anonymous, which, side note, everyone in this room knows that that's something that a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people who are not in crypto, they say, and it's all anonymous. And when it comes to Bitcoin, it's not. I mean, you can see that, this wallet did the following transactions. You might not see that it was John Miller's wallet, but you see what the wallet has done. I assume that hasn't really changed. Now, I noticed that just a couple days ago, you retweeted a 2009 tweet from Hal Finney, another person some people think was Satoshi, that said, looking at ways to add more anonymity to Bitcoin. So what would that look like, and what's your updated thinking on how to do crypto with even more privacy? I mean, in Zcash's case, or we could mention Monero, those things still don't really have huge adoption on a mass scale. So where do things stand in terms of improving Bitcoin's privacy value?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge here is everybody knows who is technically involved in this, that Bitcoin is really bad on privacy. I think the only people who do it worse actually are Ethereum, and that's because they use the account-based model as opposed to the address-based model. But a lot of people only use like one account, so they see it's like as if you were using Bitcoin, you were just reusing the same wallet. You get this giant history cruft that just follows you wherever, and then you create all these chain explorers, and then people see, every smart contract you've interacted with on Ethereum, and it's problematic. Bitcoin suffers from the same thing, but at least largely because there's not as much contract-based activity on Bitcoin. They only see, address A sends to address B and so on. They follow it out. They chart it. They see where it splits on the chain, and then they try to go where it goes back to a common node, or they track spends, or they go where it goes through KYC gateways, and they find out with the tools that I had at the NSA in like 2013, tracking Bitcoin transactions would have been very, very easy. And this is why, even though I used Bitcoin to rent the servers that I used for communicating with journalists and passing, massive archive files over the internet anonymously, I was using Tor, I was using sort of mixing services. I was trying to basically do anything that would buy time. It wasn't that I thought the NSA wouldn't be able to follow the trail. It was that, I'd have to go to this guy, and then I'd get routed over to the office, and then they wait on it because they had other things to do. And it wasn't until there would be a sustained effort that they would be able to do this. And by then, I would have already contacted the journalist, so the door would be closed. Normal Bitcoin users don't have that level of awareness. They don't understand the network flows. They don't understand simply your IP address sending, this transaction to this node that then passes it on. All of that leaves a history that is largely being recorded. There are ways on Bitcoin that they can improve this, and that are like coin join transactions and the whole join market thing, which are great, but they're way too technical for average people. We see some wallet providers who are trying to build in their own mixers, and that's great. It's an improvement, but it's really not enough. You have to have this stuff in the protocol. It has to happen on chain. And that's where you see things like, Monero is great. I use Monero, right? People think I'm like a super Monero hater, and no, they've got a couple super toxic people in their community. And there were some bad design decisions like a million years ago. And it's not perfect, right? But what is? Zcash has its own flaws too. And then Zcash, it's also great, but for a lot of people, they're not using the shielded transactions, or at least they weren't using the shielded transactions. Now it's getting easier. They've got mobile clients that will you'll do a transparent transaction, and then it'll roll you over to a shielded transaction automatically. And these things are great. This is what we need, though. We need people to be able to transact on chain at any time and effortlessly without their awareness. The same way that when you connect to, Gmail through a web browser, it's using HTTPS. You should have levels of privacy protection baked into the protocol. And this prevents the kind of tomfoolery that we see the U.S. government beginning to engage in with things like OFAC and Tornado Cash.
Since we last spoke to you in March, in late April, a story broke that we covered at Decrypt, and it turned out the story was you helped create Zcash, the privacy coin Zcash. And I think for some people that was like, whoa, but also maybe not such a surprise. It fits. Talk to us a little bit about that. That happened in 2016, and how did it come about that that news came out now, years later?
Yeah, it was a very long time ago. Again, I wasn't a central figure in the project. I didn't do any development. I didn't do any coding. It was more that they had, in order to kickstart the Zcash network, which used a novel kind of cryptography that allowed really strong privacy between transactions, that wasn't doing like, shell games trying to move things around, or just use mixing to the chain, but use zero knowledge proofs. They had to create what was being internally called like a toxic waste key. And this was a key that if anyone had it, could be used to basically mint new coins on the network and a bunch of other bad things, as I understand it. Now, there were a lot of people in like the academic cryptography circles that I followed and I was paying attention to, who were talking about how interesting this project was. And I was aware of it actually from a professor at Johns Hopkins University by the name of Matthew Green, who I think tweeted a link to a paper called Zero Cash. This was before it was Zcash. And I just saw the idea of this. And of course, I had been a long-time Bitcoin user. And I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. It's something very important that frankly should have been integrated into like the actual Bitcoin network through protocol improvements, at this period in time. But they hadn't really taken privacy seriously, and unfortunately still don't. So I was looking at this more like an academic project than, like some kind of, everybody makes crypto coins now to try to get like a capital return on it. But they were going, how do we get this key, construct this key, that if anybody had it, would be harmful, and how do we make sure nobody does this? So they created this thing called the ceremony, where they would basically do a cryptographic round among many different participants around the world, different people. And the way it was structured was such that if there was one honest person in the entire cohort, the dangerous properties of this key wouldn't exist. And you could basically ensure the network was fully safe. And all you needed was one honest person. And one person whose keys weren't stolen, whatever. Everybody else could be against it, could be trying to exploit it, could be doing whatever, and it would work. And this was something that I got approached by. I can't recall actually who approached me. It might have been Zuko. I believe probably was Zuko, who might have gotten to me because I had written about this paper and my interest in it, and said, hey, would you be willing to serve as a part of this ceremony? And I went, well, why not? I'm one person where nobody knows where I am, what I'm doing, whatever. It would be very hard to target me. I know quite a lot about computer security, but at the same time, I can at least have the honesty layer. So my sort of vulnerability in this would be hacking, right? It would be surveillance. It would be cameras in the walls from the Russians or whatever, stealing my computer, using a bad computer, or whatever. Other people might not have a hacking risk. They might have a social risk. They might have an honesty risk, something like that. But by being a part of this larger cohort, you could make sure that basically nobody cheated the network. And it worked, right? Since then, there have never been any, as far as anyone's knows, sort of greater emissions that should have happened on the network. And eventually, and this is why it came out later, was they moved beyond it. And that key is no longer used. It's no longer sort of a threat to the network. That whole sort of proving channel is gone, and they used a more modern solution that didn't have these same risks. And so they did kind of a little mini documentary talking about this, and Zuko reached out to me. It was like, would you be willing to sort of say that, you were in this? Because I participated pseudonymously. I didn't want anybody to use me for a marketing purpose. It was just to contribute.
Right. What was your pseudonym?
Sort of the improvement, the advancement of this. And so I said, yeah, sure. I was a part of this. I was John Dobbertin.
Right.
I think I was in Ljubljana, Slovenia, according to the legend.
Click here to watch Edward Snowden utterly discredit Bitcoin and Ethereum security network and listen to him reveal the only crypto he trusts enough to use himself. This video will change the way you thought you knew crypto.